This is Radio 97. We are talking law, and if you have a question for Despina, she's happy to answer any legal question you have, big or small. Just jot it in an email perhaps and send it to us. Best way to get the addresses, there are a couple of ways to get it to us, radio97.com.au. That's the best way. Right at the top there's the contact buttons, and just send the question to us, and Despina, happy to answer that for you here on a Thursday morning.
And this one is quite an interesting court case. So basically it's about a family driving around in Victoria, and they pulled into an emergency bay, which I'm sure at some stage we've probably all done. Mm-hmm. But then things went a little bit pear-shaped. Despina, can you talk us through what happened to this family in Victoria?
I can, and I came across this case recently and I thought, you know what, we've all done it. We've all had to pull over into an emergency lane for whatever reason over the years, and I thought it would be quite relevant and interesting for people to hear what happened in this case, and it's all about negligence, okay, and whether or not the person who pulled over into the emergency lane was actually in part liable for his own personal injuries that he suffered when he was struck. So contributory negligence, as we call it. So I thought, we'll talk about the facts, and then maybe people can take some things on board from what we're going to say. So, yes, this person was driving. It was called the Peninsula Link. Not familiar with it, but it's in Victoria. And he was driving with his family. Now, he had a young baby in the car, and the baby was becoming, or was causing him to be distracted because the baby was crying and stressed, and as a lot of people would be familiar, if you're driving along with a baby in the car and the baby starts crying all the time, it does stress you out as a driver.
Of course,
And I remember that many, many years ago. And then, you feel, of course, I've got to pull over and deal with the baby, particularly if you're on your own. So, and this is what this driver did. So he pulled over into the emergency lane. And then what was going to happen was they were going to swap drivers and settle the baby down, etc. So, as he obviously went into the emergency lane, this person exited and walked out of the car in front of the vehicle, his own vehicle. At that time, or a short amount of time afterwards, I'm not exactly how long afterwards, the defendant, because it was a court case, the defendant, the person who was driving on the highway, ended up veering out of the lane. So he was obviously driving in the lane directly next to the emergency lane. Mm-hmm. So we call it the left lane. And he actually struck the person that was standing in the emergency lane and caused injury. Obviously, terrible incident. So it went to court, okay? And obviously the person was suing for damages that he suffered. Yeah. So a lot of interesting things came out of the case. Now, the short of it is that the judge found the person who pulled over into the emergency lane, he was found to be 10% liable. So in other words, he contributed to his own negligence in the form of 10%. The driver who was actually driving in the left lane was 90% liable.
So
not 100%.
Okay. Interesting. So why? Why was he 10% liable?
Okay, so first of all, we go to have a look at the person we call the defendant, the person who was driving in the left lane. Let's look at his liability first. So there are road rules. When you drive on the road, of course. And in Victoria, there's a rule that says that you've got to ensure that you drive completely in a marked lane. Makes sense? You're not supposed to veer in and out of your lane. Yes. And obviously this person did, which caused the accident. So he was liable in that case. So that was that driver. Let's go to the plaintiff, the person who sued, the person who exited or drove into the emergency lane and then exited the car. So that person... when you stop into an emergency lane, there's also road rules about that if people aren't aware. So it makes sense, though, that there are road rules for everything and you can't just stop into an emergency lane for any reason. So in Victoria particularly, the road rules say that you can't stop in an emergency lane unless it's necessary or desirable or in the interest of safety. So his argument was, of course, that, look, the baby was constantly crying and shouting. It was very distracting. Therefore, it was desirable in the interest of safety that I pull over and deal with this situation, which he did. However, what the judge found and why they found that this person was 10% liable is the evidence showed through the case that the person, when he pulled over into the emergency lane, could have really pulled over a little bit more. So he could have parked a little bit further to the left, rather than right next to the lane, which made a difference. Yeah.
It's wild because immediately when I heard about the story, Despina, I assumed that whoever it was that is going over that block line, that line clearly on the road, they're the ones that would be 100% at fault for this. But because even though he's in the emergency lane and he's parked there and he got out, even though he's in that safe, I guess-ish, safe zone, and got clipped, he's a little bit at fault because he was too far over. It's interesting.
Well, yes. And when we talk about road rules, let's also talk about your own safety. So there are road rules where you have to also take care and take reasonable care for your own safety. And the judge found here, look, there was a lack of care.
Yeah.
Because he did pull over into the emergency lane. Yes, it was a valid reason. However, he didn't pull over far enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting, yes, because the judge said he failed to take reasonable care for his own safety. And another interesting fact, it happened during the day. So normally you would think, you wouldn't need to put your hazard lights on, although I think, and I think, though, that you should put your hazard lights on. If you're pulling over and there's an accident, I think you might find there's some road rules about that.
Yeah.
But the judge actually said, look, it was during the day, clearly visible. The fact that he didn't have his hazard lights on made absolutely no difference to the outcome
There you go.
of who was liable and in what proportions. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting too. But I guess the message is, of course, the driver who actually caused the injury was overwhelmingly responsible.
Yes.
And that makes sense. He's in a car. The person was a pedestrian. He was or standing next to his vehicle in the emergency lane. But don't always assume that just because you're in the emergency lane, that if you did get hit, it's not going to be your fault or partly your fault.
Yeah.
So you always need to take reasonable care regardless of what you do. But particularly when you pull over into an emergency lane, make sure you go all the way to the left or as far as possible.
Far left. Far left, guys.
I don't know how many times I've seen that on the highway where you see people stopping for whatever reason and they get out of their car and they're actually getting out of the car into the lane of traffic as the traffic's going past.
But some people are so flippant.
Yeah. You're kidding me. You are kidding me. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often, actually.
Well, that's right. And people do get distracted, unfortunately. And this driver who was in the highway momentarily sweared or out of his lane.
Wow, interesting stuff. As always, thank you so much, Despina. And if anyone does want to get in touch with you directly, where can they go?
Yes, and they can phone the office 55291 294, or they can email info@prialalegal.com.au. And I will have these segments uploaded on YouTube this weekend, as always, if they've missed it.
Good stuff. Thank you so much again, Wayne and Despina.
We'll see you next week.
Great. See you then, guys.